Welcome to Exit Point, a podcast about the advancement of base jumping and the exploration of its culture. I'm Matt Blank, producer and co-host. If you'd like to support this independent production, please visit our Buy Me a Coffee link in the description and leave us a review wherever you listen to podcasts. In this episode, I'm talking with Annie Helliwell. She's a true original gangster, having pioneered and invented a substantial portion of the techniques and technology we still use today. Annie's a living legend that's so low-key, the next generation of base jumper may fail to recognize her on the drop zone, but is worth traveling the world just to converse with. I feel incredibly lucky to have met Annie early on in my base progression, and stoked she agreed to pull over to have a chat with us so we can have her voice and experience on record. So without further ado, let's get Annie on the track. Maybe we should start by me saying, Annie, I've always found you to be a very attractive person.
Thank you.
And actually, let me start by saying that I'm incredibly thankful that you're taking the time out of your day to do this with us.
Oh, well, it's only taken several years.
Yeah. And my last thank you for right now is thanks for showing me my first cliff. I don't know if you remember that moment, but we did my first cliff together.
Which was?
Rubidoux.
Woohoo!
Yeah.
Oh, wow. What a claim to fame.
Yeah. And I learned some really valuable lessons from you on that particular jump. One surrounding the fatality that happened on that cliff that you were present for.
Oh, you jumped after that, obviously, several years after that, maybe.
Right. But you showed me the plaque that was still there.
Yeah. That was a monumental moment.
Yeah. Do tell.
Well, gosh, it's kind of jumping right into the deep end. It was Teresa Tran, and her and I were roommates and good friends. And she was an up-and-coming rigger. And she was eager to base jump. She was also an up-and-coming base jumper, and she just wanted to jump off everything she saw, which you know how that is in the beginning. So she decided that she wanted to go on December the 20th to the cliff to Rubidoux. And I'm going, okay, do you really want me to get into all the details or just subtle details?
You get into as many of the details as you see fit. I've got my side of the story to share afterwards, which definitely get into some of those details. So if you don't want to share them, I'm happy to.
I'm totally totally not happy either. I'm totally okay with sharing them, but people aren't necessarily okay with hearing them. Well, that's the big difference, and I've learned that.
Then I think at this point, people who are listening have been sufficiently warned that there is maybe some dark topics about to be discussed. Okay.
So Teresa and I, it was early in the morning on December the 20th. I've even forgotten the year. It's written on the plaque. But it was beautiful. It was a happy morning. We were put our cars, back in those days you could park the car right pretty close to pretty close to the landing areas. We could drive on up there. And then we hiked the hill, and it was a beautiful morning. And then when we got to the top, for some reason I went first. I don't know why. It was just like, you're going first and me going first anyway. So I jumped first, and it's a static line. We tied in with the static lines and had brake tie, just as kind of what we do now, if it's not PCA, but we tied in. So I jumped and got on the ground and turned around and looked at her. And I could see her standing up on the cliff, and I could see that she was tied in because I could see the static line between her legs. And then when she jumped, nothing opened, and she turned from a facing me heading to a 90 degrees. So I could see the side of her body, and she was kicking and doing a lot of body movements, and I saw the pilot chute just sitting on her back and not doing anything. And then she hit the ground. And I went running up to her, and it was dead on impact. There was no breath, no life, no nothing. And it was really interesting because it was back in the day when cell phones just started. And I had been given a cell phone by Nick Giovanni, who was my boyfriend at the time, for my birthday or something like that. And I thought, I don't know why I need this cell phone. It's just giving me a monthly bill and I hardly use it because we've all got landlines, right? Way in the beginning. Man, that cell phone came in handy. I whipped that cell phone out, called 911, and got rescue to come straight away. And I went, I will never not have a cell phone again. You know, it was great. Anyway, and then they showed up, and the ambulance showed up first, and they said, she's gone. And I went, yeah, I know that. You know?
Because you were a nurse at the time.
Yeah, right? Yeah. Well, I was a trained nurse when I left school in my 17, 18, 19 years, 20, 21 was when I was training nursing and working nursing. So, yeah, I already had that base. And then the cop showed up, and the cop was a female. And the reason we were actually doing it super early in the morning is because we thought it was illegal and we were trying not to get any attention. Well, we got a lot of attention.
Yeah.
So the cop showed up, and then we had this news media wannabe kind of guy who was running around trying to take pictures. And the cool thing with Teresa's landing is it was behind a big rock. So it wasn't out to the open. There was this big rock there, and she just had landed, if you call it a landing, right behind the rock. And the cop and I were sitting on the rock, and it was a girl, and she said to me, why do you jump so early in the morning? And I didn't want to say, so as we don't bring the attention to you.
Yeah.
I said, well, look at it. Isn't it beautiful? It's cool. It's calm. There's hardly any noise. It's just a beautiful, calm morning, and that's perfect for us.
So after the meeting with the authorities, and this is where I kind of pick up the story, how did you figure out what had happened?
Well, her bridle was S-folded into her BOC with, I hesitate to say this, I think with a really light rubber band. And her pilot chute was placed. Now, how did I know her pilot chute was placed in the BOC? Because, how do I know that? I don't, but I did know that. The pilot chute was the only thing that came out of the pouch, but it didn't get bridle stretch.
Yeah.
So it was only just hovering on her back. She was a budding rigger, and she didn't like laying her pilot chute on the rock and it dragging across the rock. So as I did, and I went, it's only a pilot chute. Back in the day, they were $40 and we could make them anyway. So we didn't care. And it wasn't ruining the pilot chute at all. It was just following behind us. And yes, it was on the rock, but it wasn't showing any damage. But she decided that she didn't want to damage her pilot chute. So she had loosely folded the bridle and loosely put the pilot chute in the pocket. But she had also tied the static line to the pilot chute. So the static line took a corner. It came where as soon as it went taut, it backed into her pilot chute pocket and then back out to the rock. So the actual brake tie was
basically folded in our BOC.
Yeah.
Yeah. And not able to be tensioned in the correct way.
Exactly. Yeah. It took a corner.
Yeah.
So when it broke, it hadn't broken enough. It broke in the BOC.
Yeah, without actually pulling the pins out.
Yeah, well, it had got as far as pulling the pilot chute out, which I saw just dancing on her back. It didn't even pull the bridle out.
Yeah.
Yeah, but she was kind of experimenting, which was a shame. She didn't need to experiment.
Well, there was two things that I learned off of that experience, and I was actually very grateful that you shared that story with me after we had landed from the jump, just to bring it back to like where I met this story. It was doing my first cliff with you, and you pointed out the plaque, and then you said, I'm going to tell you something about that plaque after we land.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool.
And then we landed from the jump, and I was like, okay, so what about that plaque?
Yeah.
You know? And then you told me that story.
And has the story changed, or am I keeping it
Not
still?
at all. The story is exactly the same.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, because the same lesson is definitely apparent. The first of which being, if you're going to be an innovator, then test in areas where you have some margin. Like that person was definitely innovating for, a purpose that might not needed to have been innovated. But like it or not, like she was the early bird, out the door. Right. And, the common phrase is the early bird gets the worm. But on that jump, I learned like base jumpers are more the worm. And so like the first one gets eaten.
Yeah. Yeah. And the other thing is, if you want to be innovative, do it on the table. Test in house, test in the shop, figure all that out first. Don't use yourself as a test pilot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The second thing I learned from that one right off the bat was that our gear is more resilient than we think in a lot of different ways. Like it's not made of glass. And that was a really valuable lesson because I didn't come from parachuting world. I came from climbing world. And from climbing world, like all of those materials look very, very thin, and it's like I would like potentially care about my pilot chute, like dragging across that, even though it did nothing because that's just the world that I came from.
Yeah. Yeah. So you were saying from a climber to a base jumper or even a skydiver. Yeah. Your climbing gear is pretty rugged.
Oh, yeah.
And our skydiving and base gear is very, very thin.
Very thin in comparison. Yeah.
Yes.
So like that was a moment for me. It was great because, I was really babying my equipment. And then I heard that story and why that ended up the way it did. And I'm like, okay, so like some of this stuff I need to rewire in my head is a little more robust so that I don't end up making a mistake just to protect something I don't need to.
Yeah. And we were making it strong too. And the equipment had been TSO'd pretty much. In skydiving, the equipment was TSO'd, and we were building the equipment up to the standard of the TSO.
Yeah.
For base jumping. So
there's also another lesson that I learned about base jumping from doing this cliff with you, but maybe I can ask you what the history of Rubidoux and base jumping is, because I know that it has a long-standing history with Apex and with your design innovations specifically. There
was a guy back in the 80s. Oh man, they're going to kill me for not remembering his name. Who lived in LA and was coming out to jump at Paris. I'm sorry, maybe Elsinore, I think. I'll have to get his name. And he was looking at that cliff thinking that he would like to jump it because he was a budding base jumper too back in the day. And I believe he went and jumped it with a round, different spot from where we jump now. And then it was open, so he jumped it a couple of times. I don't believe I really jumped it with him, but the link was he was a good friend of Nick DiGiovanni's. And then when I dated Nick for a while, we went up and jumped the rock. And he introduced it to me, I believe. And then we started jumping from a different site. And then we just started jumping it because it was pretty easy. And it was all static line. There were rock climbers that would climb up there, and a rock climber, somebody, John is the name of the guy, put in a really solid anchor point, and we were tying into that and just using military 80-pound brake tie, and it was great. There was a lot of low openings, meaning the canopy didn't, not openings, but pressurization. So the parachutes were not always flying well before landing. They were still pressurized, but at the bottom half of the jump, not the top half of the jump. And that's when we started to bring out the bottom inflation, the vents on the parachute, because the parachute was acting like a round because we didn't have any time to give it any ram air. So for inflation, and it was opening as if it was opening because all the air was coming from the bottom. And we wanted to open the bottom, so we put in the vents there in the beginning, and we tested it with a dummy.
Yeah, this is what I remember, is that like there was a big like kind of A-arm type of thing at the top of the exit point that was left over from when you guys used it as testing, for all of the new designs that you were coming out with.
So back then we were basic research, and it was Todd and I, and we had a 200-pound dummy and a great idea about putting vents in the bottom of a parachute. And we had a truck and a rope, and we hoisted the 200-pound dummy up with that A-frame that brought the rope beyond the edge of the rock. And then we drove it away with the truck. So one of us was on the ground and one of us was at launch point, rigging it all up. And then when we got the dummy up there, the other person would go up the top. So both of us threw the dummy off on static line. So we tested it as a dummy. It was a big metal dummy shaped as a person, and with a full-on harness on, the parachute on and everything. So we did it the right way.
I mean, that sounds like so much stunt science. I love it, And so at Rubidoux, this 186-foot cliff in Riverside is where...
173.
173. Okay.
86 maybe if you jump up. Well, I've always thought it to be 173.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. From the low or from the high exit?
From the normal exit.
From the normal exit. Okay. Yeah. I thought the normal exit was 186, but I could be wrong.
Oh, we should figure that out. Yeah.
But
that could be important, those extra 13 feet.
Though I'm reasonably positive, having not lived here for several years now, and you actually coming from the era where you were doing literal testing, that you're probably recollecting the height of this better than me.
I think so. We should test it. But then down the line, people started free falling it.
Yeah, that's where I came into the game.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. But what I really wanted to kind of ask about was those early days too of doing those innovations, like this 170, what did you say it was?
173.
173 foot cliff being the test ground for so many innovations that we still use today, like VTEC.
Yeah.
That's on every canopy now, except for several that are European designed.
Yeah.
But how did you guys come up with that idea? What was the process by which you arrived at the cliffside, like throwing a 200, pound dummy off with it?
Well, it was me actually. I jumped it one day and somebody was filming it from the bottom, and we were watching the lack of pressurization in a flying wing. So we didn't really get a lot of flight out of it, and I landed not as far as normal, or more in between the little road that was there and the talus of the cliff, or the base of the cliff. And I was like, wow, that wasn't a very good flight, because we would say, can we make it to the road? We used to say, can we make it to the road? And this one was nowhere near. And it just happened to be videoed, which was really good, because back in the day, we never had video. Rubidoux, we were jumping at daylight early in the morning, but every other base jump was at night because it wasn't legal.
Yeah.
So we couldn't see what was going on. We didn't have video, but Rubidoux gave us video, and it gave us daylight so we could do it. And it was quick, short jumps, and then we'd run away thinking it was illegal. And now it's different. But we learned that we needed to put pressurization in, obviously, into a parachute, the ram air in there. So that's what I'm saying. It was trying to get the air from the bottom. You could see it in the video. So we just went, Todd was the big innovator of the company, and I would be the test dummy and he would be the innovator.
I love it.
Yeah. So anyway, we did that, and then and that was it. Then we hoisted it up and checked it out. And it worked great. But then what happened, it inflated really well, but then its flight distance was suffering, because the air was now, when it was pressurized, now the air was falling out the bottom. So then we put valves on it so they would close, and then the distance would be a lot better. But one of the guys told me when he was starting to jump the the vented VTEC canopies. He said, you made all my buildings in town taller.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, the bottom end is so much better with that. Oh
Yeah.
my gosh. And you pressurize quicker, you've got more air time.
Yeah.
Let me ask you this. Do you think that modern VTEC really detracts from glide ratio? Because it certainly still gets a bad rap when it comes to, glide ratio. But with the modernization of the valve technique or technology, it doesn't seem like that might be still the case. What do you think?
Well, everyone's doing it now. All the manufacturers are doing it now. And I think there's a lot of brains in on it to cure all the solve all the problems. It's not just Todd and I. And, we didn't patent it or anything, but it made the sport a little bit safer. So we were never into patenting things to make money. We'd prefer to spread the word and make it safer. So what I'm getting at is we've got all these mega base minds of people building parachutes. And I think with that, it has helped with getting a better VTEC and better glide ratio and figuring out all the quirks.
I was talking to Todd just the other day about this very thing, about how you didn't patent a lot of this stuff because you wanted it to be open source for the community. And the question I asked him was like kind of straight to the point, like, hey, do you regret not holding on to some of those things because it's allowed for an industry that like kind of anyone picks up your technology, reproduces it, and then you've got another competitor on the market, which has led, from the heyday of Apex being 90% of the market share, like the gold standard, to like Todd kind of half retiring and, Apex not producing the same stuff as they used to. Like, does it, looking back, are there any regrets over that? Or is like the contribution that you've made to the community good enough that it's irrelevant?
Well, from my point of view, I stepped sideways and let the company go without me because I did need to go and find some more money. And it's not a high profit, a high risk sport in a high risk sport, Yeah. Skydiving's a high risk sport, and then you get a higher risk sport out of that. It's not a big market very much. I was listening up to hear what Todd's answer was. I thought you were going to say, because
Todd's answer. Yeah. Todd's answer was that he didn't get into it for the business. He got into it to improve base jumping as a whole. And he was happy for people to, take the stuff that he had come up with and take it the next step.
Especially when it was saving lives.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so like, even when I said like, what do you think about somebody potentially just straight copying your canopy and then marketing it differently? And he's like, it's a form of flattery, and I don't, everything's kind of a copy of a copy. We innovated, we changed things. The 7-cell parachute's not really like a ground up innovation anymore. And so like, he didn't really take offense to it. In fact, he was somewhat complimented by it.
Yeah. And yes, I totally agree. So that's what happened with Tailgate too.
Yeah. And that's what next one I wanted to get into. So when was the inception of the Tailgate? I've heard some rumors that it came out of a malfunction that you had at the bridge.
It came out of a malfunction that I had at the antenna.
At the antenna, okay.
Yeah.
San Diego?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, we were doing all our base jumps in the dark because pretty much, especially in America, it was illegal. So we were not getting a lot of footage out of it. And then we did Magic Mountain. And we had a big display to do for, what do you call it in America when the school starts? It was around April. What do you call it in April?
When school starts?
Well, it's not, yeah.
Or spring break?
Spring break.
Yeah.
We had a spring break festival going on at Magic Mountain, and Teresa, before she died, obviously, had got us into doing a demo for them off the top of the tower into Magic Mountain.
Sweet.
Yeah. So we did that, and it was great. And it was one of our first daylight ones. So there was a lot of video from the top and the bottom and stuff like this. And after that, we looked at our parachutes and we could see these, but we saw them, we'd seen this grow. We'd seen line burns down the end cells of our parachutes when we were packing them.
Yeah.
But during Magic Mountain with the footage, we could see what was going on. And it wasn't a line over, it was kind of a partial line over. So the line hadn't actually gone over the nose on these openings because we didn't have any slider to control them.
Yeah.
That it had just whipped down the side. It hadn't flipped right over the nose.
Okay.
So it was showing us these little line burns down the side. And you could see the the back corner of the canopy just going flip and then back straight again.
So like less of a line over and more of an end cell under, just kind of.
It was an end cell over.
End cell over, okay.
Yeah. Because the line of the brake line on the far outside was following it. And as it inflated, the brake line left these marks down the sides of the canopy, these line burns, vertical line burns down the side of the canopy. And we didn't actually see it until Magic Mountain. And so we saw it on that. And then soon after that, it was Simon Jakeman and I, and we were up the antennas in San Diego. And they were about 600 feet. And we went up there. They were great because they were antennas, and then they had a platform that came out at the top, like an A with a T on top.
Yeah.
And he jumped first, and then I jumped second. And my opening was so perfect, I didn't even look up. And then I just grabbed my toggles and I started to use them. And as I pulled the left toggle, my canopy did a violent swing to the right. And as I'm pendulumed out and I see a bow tie smack bang in the middle of my parachute. Yeah. So then as I'm coming around having no control, I'm heading back to the antenna and I'm going, no, I don't want to hit it. And my canopy's end cell caught in the antenna. And then it swung me in, and then I'm tumbling through it.
Oh, you missed the bars on the entry? So like you went cleanly into the antenna?
Well, no, I'm in the bars.
Okay.
I'm upside down and hitting and hitting and hitting. And I went bang on my helmet, and I remember going, oh, good thing I'm wearing a helmet.
Were you wearing other pads too?
I don't think so.
Oh, man.
But then the antenna was going by because I was coming by backwards. And I'm thinking, I got to grab something. But it was going past me so fast the wrong way. You know, I couldn't grab. It was all leaving me. And I'm watching my canopy going, please hook on something.
Yeah,
please hook on something. Don't drop me out in the open. And right when I thought that, it dropped me out in the open. I went, no. And then I started hitting again. And what happened is I went through the middle. So the actual part of the antenna that I started hitting, now it didn't drop me. And now I'm going through the other side and hitting the other side. Bang, bang, bang. And then bang, it stopped. And I grabbed something. And I had landed flat bang on my butt on one of the walkways.
Holy shit.
And the tree line was taller than I was. So because I grabbed my stuff. And Jakey comes up, he's at the bottom of the ladder, and he goes, are you okay? And I go, yeah. And I grabbed my parachute from the antenna, and then I started, the ladder was right there. And I went, oh, just climb down the ladder for the rest.
How are you okay after that?
Well, then Jakey goes, let's get out of here, because it was not a legal jump. So I'm running, and we get to the car, and we throw my gear in the car, and I sit down in the car, and then we drive off. And we drive into town, and then he stopped at a gas station for a drink or something, and I could not get out of the car.
Oh.
I was like so sore. I went, there is no way I'm going to get up. You know?
Yeah.
So anyway, the next day I did, of course. We come home, and then the next day I got up, I was black and blue from my waist to my heels, down both legs.
Wow.
Yeah, it's just total black and blue with a totally ripped up parachute. And then I went back to the shop. It was basic research back then. And I go, Todd, we have a problem. We have to fix this line over thing. And I go, and look. Yeah.
Okay, hang on a second. I'm going to catch up to the story, but I'm astounded that the first place that you go is not the hospital.
No, we went back to the shop to figure it out.
That's pretty badass. I mean, you definitely get credit in our community and culture for being this kind of Annie Oakley type of character, and it certainly shows in a lot of the stories that you tell.
I didn't even know that.
Yeah, totally. Okay.
Yeah.
So after you recover, you come up with the tailgate to solve the problem.
Yes.
What was that design and innovation phase like? I mean, I'm certain that you guys had other things that might have served that purpose, but then you landed there. I'm curious as to why.
Well, Todd, as I said, Todd was the innovator, and he came up with this little line. So basically what we needed the parachute to do was open the nose before the tail. And a line over was when the tail opened before the nose. So if you can go to extremes and think that the nose is actually still packed and the tail is still open, it's got all these brake lines that are free to fly, which flipped over the nose that was still compressed.
Yeah.
In an extreme. So the nose is still in one packet and the tail is flipping over, and it just grabs the cells as the nose opens. So there's 3 ways a parachute would open back then. One was, and this is without a slider and before the tailgate. So one way of opening is, as I said, the tail had opened first, the nose was still compressed, and then the nose would open second. The other way is the nose would open first, the tail would open second, and then it would pressurize. The other way is concertina, left, right, left, right, left, right.
Yeah.
So they're the 3 ways the parachute was open, and you couldn't dial in a particular way.
Huh.
It was just how it was happening. And it was just random. And then we realized that you needed always the tail to open last. We just needed to retard the tail just so the nose could always open first. So we got the little red line and we put it in the middle C line, which was going to be the first tight stretched one because it's coming right up from the riser to the middle of the parachute. And then we collected the brake lines on that and tied a rubber band around and tested the rubber band. They're called mini rubber bands. Back then they were Phantom rubber bands, I think, because
they were almost not there.
No, because the Phantom company were using them on their reserves. So they were used on Phantom reserves.
Okay.
So anyway, we had those, and we could put 15 pounds of pressure on that tailgate, closing the tailgate with 3 wraps. And that was consistent. And then, so again, we tested it at Rubidoux, and we also were just having Moab base boogies at that time. So we took them to the Moab base boogie, and Todd and I had them. So we were having a base boogie, and we'd come up with this great idea, and we had them on our parachutes. And we were wanting to show them to others, and most base jumpers were saying, don't touch my gear, it works. Don't put any innovative stuff on my gear, it already works. Leave it alone, leave it alone. And then we had a line over right there with Seth, and we could all see because it was base boogie and it was in daylight and everybody was watching, all the base jumpers. We had competition and teams, and Seth had a line over and it was right in front of our faces. And he landed on the top of the talus on a rock and lacerated his chin. We whipped him off to the hospital. He came back that evening just with sutures in his chin. And then everyone's coming to us that evening going, put one on mine, put one on mine, put one on mine.
Of course.
So Todd and I are sitting there sewing in these tailgates all night long for people. So then what happened is the tailgate was very popular at that point and everyone's using it, but the 15-pound rubber band we were using was falling off. And whatever base site we were going to, they were then called trash gates because we were littering. And we went, we have to stop this. So now we went to Lark's heading them on, and it's still a 15-pound wrap.
But if you 2 wraps instead of 3, right?
Yeah, well, it's all, it's, if you tie it on really, really tight, you can still, and put it by the knob, there's so many variables here.
There are so many variables. And that's really another question I wanted to ask you about. There are so many different ways that people are doing that these days, like, multiple wraps, less wraps, few wraps, using tape, using all types of other things. Tell me just right off the bat, using painter's tape that you get from the Home Depot, good idea, bad idea?
Well, the Aussies came up with that. Yeah. They were doing tape gates.
So can we just assume that if it's an Australian idea that it's
a bad idea?
Bad idea?
Exactly. But the thing is, do you know the tensile strength of that tape? That's the thing.
I don't.
No, we knew a consistent line that we had and a consistent thickness and a consistent rubber band, and we tested them. Any variation to that, you're a test jumper. Yeah. Because you don't know how many wraps of painter's tape and all that. And if it's working for you, as long as you're using a tailgate, I'm just happy these days. Every time I watch a video, I look to see if it's nose opening first and tail later. And I'm thinking, yes, it is. Yes, it is. All the manufacturers are doing a tailgate. All the instructors are teaching to use a tailgate. And you can see all the video these days. I always watch and I'm going, yes, nose first, tail second, nose first, tail second. And it's great. It's lovely. Yeah. And what happened was, it was about April was our Moab boogie. No, it was later than April. But what happened was we kept them in-house. It's like beta testing, and we didn't really let them out to a lot of manufacturers. This was before Moab, because Magic Mountain was April. We were keeping them in-house right up until throughout the year, doing our beta testing before we could actually get the numbers and send them out to everybody. And then Gary Dawson died in New Zealand of a line over, and it was on video, and you could see totally him, a line over, his parachute's out of control, and he hit the cliff and he died. And I said, Todd, we got to go. We got to send it out. Let's not have anybody die anymore. Yeah. Let's not fuss around. Let's go. And then we send it out. And I think it was because Gary died in December, and then it was January, February, March-ish, April, somewhere in there was Moab. And we're going, you guys, you got to use this. And they said no until Seth had a line over right in front of everybody, and then it was out and everybody was doing it. And we didn't want to hold it back and patent it. It was easily copied. It was just a little piece of line. Yeah. And we just wanted manufacturers to say it was Basic Research's tailgate. We'll put Basic Research's tailgate on your equipment. We just wanted them to know. But that was years and years ago now, and I'm just so happy that a line over is not... It used to be the biggest killer in base jumping, and now it's not. Now it's almost 99% gone.
I can see how that would give you a lot of satisfaction.
It does. It does. Yeah, it still does. I watch that people are using them, and the videos I see, I go, yep, you're using something.
Yeah, nailed
even
it.
Even if it's painter's tape, which I don't recommend. Yeah.
Oh, man. That sounds very much like, health concerns in the 1970s. As long as somebody's using one, you don't care who makes it. Let me ask you this. How is it to know something that could save people's lives and still be met with resistance getting people to adopt a new idea? That seems like something that Apex and you and Basic Research have been doing for many generations.
True, but that's the industry we're in. It's the industry we're in. We were innovative from the beginning, and you've got to convince people that their equipment that they trust needs changing.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's not until it's in front of their face, like what Seth did to our Moab boogie, that everybody sees it. and then they step forward and start using it. But it's the people that we're dealing with,
Yeah.
Don't touch my shit.
Yeah. Not
Yeah.
even for a gear tech, don't touch my shit. Yeah.
Exactly. I've already checked it. Now we're on launch point. Leave me alone.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's an intensely personal relationship that they draw, and I find it even difficult today to try and convince people to think innovatively, like to think that like their equipment is never done. It's always a work in progress. There's always something else that can be improved, and it's an incredibly difficult conversation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can't imagine, trying to do this with something in hand like the tailgate or vents or any of the number of other things that you guys invented along the way, which actually brings me to another topic that we need to get into. The topic was given to me by Kelly Federo.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and she was curious for me to ask you about Old Gray, a parachute in your garage.
Okay, how far do I go back here? I was fortunate when I first came to America to pick up a job with Free Flight Enterprises in Elsinore. It was Gary DeReese. Gary DeReese gave me my rigger's ticket in the early 80s. And he was blown away, gave me his rigger. He was the examiner. And he was blown away with my skills that he was discussing it in the bomb shelter at Paris one day. And he said, that he just passed this person for a rigger's ticket. And he goes, and she's a girl. Because all the riggers were guys. It was like, and she's a girl. And then he hired me. So after that, he hired me. He had a parachute manufacturing company, which he's dead now, and Ernie and Abraham are running it, and they're now building the Cirrus parachutes that come down with the Cirrus 20s and 22 aircraft.
Yeah.
He was doing hang gliding back then, and he goes, yeah, you can work for me. So I had a job, and after hours, he gave me the keys to his shop that I could just stay there and sew. He had all these sewing machines. I could build something, and I went, I want to build a parachute. So I had a Pegasus at the time, which was a 220 square foot 7-cell, and I just pulled a rib out of it and made a rib copy, a rib pattern. It was all out of cardboard of these days.
Yeah.
And got some of his gray fabric and started putting a parachute together, which was really funny because I built it from the nose to the tail, and the top skin and the bottom skin didn't meet. It was meant to, but it didn't meet. The rib and the three pieces, the rib, the top skin, and the bottom skin, were meant to come to a common point, and they were all everywhere. So I just got a pair of scissors and cut it all off. I cut about 3 inches off it. So I went, you meet now. And then I rolled some tape in the tail.
Hey, if it was working, it's working.
Yeah,
right?
yeah. And then I put on a line set pretty much similar to what the Pegasus had, but I wasn't so sure about it. So I left a lot of the bar tacks out. So I just looped it through the tab and then finger trapped it back into itself. And finger trapping a line into itself is actually quite secure because when it tightens, it holds the middle in. But I did actually tie a lark's head to the top of it as well, so it had that. And then I could adjust it each time. So I went skydiving it, and I had a container that, it fit my Pegasus. The container that my Pegasus was in. And so I jumped it a lot. And then I really never did sew. It still doesn't have those bar tacks put in there because I thought I was going to try and change the trim, but it was pretty good. And back in the day, we didn't have base gear, and we were just base jumping our skydiving gear. So I started base jumping it as well. It was my main canopy. So I started base jumping it off Burrow Creek Bridge. And it was fine. It just worked great. So Then I built another parachute. It was a copy of a Bandit. And then I built a copy of a Vector. And I put the Bandit in the reserve container. And the old grey, she wasn't old then, the grey one in the main. And that was my home-built equipment for years.
I've heard a lot of people talk about building their own parachutes. I'm curious, how commonplace was that in your era? Because it doesn't seem to be commonplace at all at this point.
It wasn't commonplace. It was to the point where I didn't even have to tell anybody. Nobody said,
no
"Is
one
that
would
home?"
suspect it.
Is that, yeah, it was just a parachute.
So you're just flying under the wire, like doing your own thing here.
But a main
under the
parachute,
radar.
that's fine. You can on a main.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, you could jump a bed sheet if you wanted to.
Exactly, as long as you pack it yourself.
Yeah.
Yes. But they didn't know, and since I was the rigger, they didn't know that my reserve was also home built. So I just signed it off for myself. And maybe that was wrong, because if I did go in on it, then I did have a packing data card and everything. Yeah, they would have to really look at it to think, because I think I even borrowed a TSO label.
A base jumper at heart there. That's just the base jumper spirit there.
Yeah. So then when I ventured on from there, and then I started working as a rigger at Paris skydiving, and I was running the loft back then, and I hired Todd. I was a master rigger, and Todd came looking for a job, and he was a senior rigger. And I hired him. I didn't even know him. I hired him. And I didn't know that in his basement, he was building base containers, the Velcro containers back then.
Yeah.
Todd and Troy, TNT Rigging, were building the containers. And I was building the parachute. I went, hey, let's get together.
Let's get this together, yeah.
And then what happened is we went out to Lake Powell. We had a Lake Powell houseboat booked, and there was about 10 of us base jumpers going in on this Lake Powell houseboat, and we were jumping skydiving gear. Everyone was jumping skydiving gear. I was jumping my grey parachute, but the idea was also to jump rounds, because we were landing in the water, and the rounds were easy to
repack.
Easy to dry.
Oh, yeah.
Because we're landing in water. And it didn't matter about the landing. You didn't have to come to a nice tippy-toe flare point. We're just landing in the water. Smashing in the water. So it didn't matter. So there were a whole bunch of rounds and a couple of squares. And then one day we were grounded because of the weather. We had about 10 base jumpers all jumping old skydiving gear. And we were all on the boat hanging out doing nothing. And they said, why don't you... Because I'm jumping a home-built base gear, canopy, all grey. And they go, why don't you build a parachute that we can... No, I said, I'm going to build a parachute for base jumping. What is it that we want specific to a base jumping canopy? I mean, we want fast openings. We want easy light on the rear risers so you can control it if you're on an off-heading opening. And obviously we wanted quick drying canopies and all this sort of stuff. But I came up with a page and a half of things that people wanted on a base jumping canopy. And I looked at it going, whoa, that's going to be tricky, getting all this together. And Todd came up to me and said, do you want help with that? And I go, hell yeah.
Nice.
So that's where basic research came from. I had a sewing machine. He had a sewing machine. We put it in my garage, my other house. And he and I were sewing parachutes to sewing machines, and he and I were sewing parachutes in the garage together. And every stitch you did, you held your breath. And I looked up at him, I went, have you taken a breath yet? You know?
Yeah, we're really doing this.
So precise.
Yeah.
We're really doing it. It was so precise. Yeah, and then we started throwing those off. Luckily, we had a 200-pound dummy. We started throwing those out of a hot air balloon. Dave Balia had a hot air balloon. He said, come up and you can throw them off with us. I think he was up in Cal City. So we went up in the morning and was throwing those parachutes that Todd and I built off a hot air balloon. And then they seemed to work. So guess who the next dummy was?
You.
Me.
Yep. So I've got two questions on that front. First, Is it scary jumping your own equipment? You know, like in those early days when you started taking old gray before it was old gray, when it was new gray, from the skydiving to base. And my second question is, it seems like you guys kind of really put your focus into every stitch on those canopies. Where do you draw the line when it comes to responsibility when you're in the driver's seat of innovation like that?
Well, the first question was, it was actually easy to jump what you made because you knew every stitch of it. And we were matching TSO'd canopies. We used the same fabric, we used the same thread, we used the same amount of stitches per inch. Everything was copied from a TSO, or everything was TSO'd canopy. Well, the fabric's not TSO, but the line and everything. So we copied a TSO canopy.
Which is basically to say that it was backed by some research, some scientific research.
Yeah. And it was actually easier to jump because the more you build your own, then you go to jump someone else's, you go, oh, let me check this out first.
Yeah.
So that wasn't hard. What was your second question?
The second question was, it seems like you guys poured over every stitch when you were starting to manufacture these for other people, you know?
Oh, yeah.
And I'm curious where you draw the line when it comes to your responsibility putting canopies on the market like that.
We had a really good dealer in Europe that helped us out. Helliwell was his name. And he liked our product. There were no base jumping canopies. And he liked our product and started selling them in Europe. Now, Adam Filipino started with the Mojo soon after. But right in the beginning, he didn't have international shipping skills. And I did, because I came from New Zealand. I was always shipping international.
Shipping yourself back and forth.
Yeah. But and so we easily just jumped to shipping stuff to Helliwell. And he ended up being a dealer for us and selling a lot of the canopies out there. And then the Mojo, we had the Fox, and Adam had the Mojo. And of course, it's not hard to learn about international shipping.
Yeah.
So then they were both out. Yeah. And nobody, I'd like to say nobody jumped skydiving gear anymore. And it was frowned upon because this was specifically made for base jumping.
In that first era where you guys were basically setting the standard for base equipment, did it weigh on you the more canopies went into the market? Like, was it, a stressful enterprise because this was untested equipment and people's lives were on the line? Or were you confident enough that it did not concern you to the point where you were, shaking or, sweating at home,
We were confident enough in our product, but we also knew we were selling to base jumping.
Yeah.
And base jumping was a high-risk sport, and the chance of injury and death is there. And if it's on our gear, we felt so guilty. What happened? What went wrong? Tell us, And we were also, fearful that someone could just turn around and sue us.
Yeah.
Which they wouldn't have got anything for except a couple of sewing machines is all we had.
Yeah.
Yeah. We didn't have anything else except we got some really good sewers working for us. We had sewing machines, and then we realized also that we started to do was teach, because the word was out and base jumping was happening, especially when with Europe and then the legalization of it, or it never really did get legalized, but the acceptance of it and how we could use BLM land, Bureau of Land Management. And we did a lot of jumps out there in Europe. They never had anything against jumping off objects anyway. It's not like the National Park and Yosemite, and they didn't like us, and that's a big backstory.
Yeah.
That everybody's, I'm sure, aware of. Yeah. So it was kind of frowned upon with us, and of course it was frowned upon because we're jumping off people's buildings. So it got a really bad beginning until we could show it more. Like at Magic Mountain, we showed it more. And then the media came at us and went, oh, tell us about this new sport. And I went, what new sport are you talking about? And they go, base jumping. I go, it's not a new sport. You guys have just discovered it.
Yeah.
We've been doing it for years.
Yeah. I love that answer.
Yeah, so that's the hard part. It is a high-risk sport and people die.
Speaking of eras of base jumping, what was your favorite era to be jumping in?
I believe it's probably the 90s when we took first jump, well, anyway, novice base jumpers to Norway, and we would hike up the hill with them and teach them and show them their first jumps and hang out at the top of the mountain with them and watch their emotion. And people's emotions are hugely diverse in that particular point. Some are go, go, go. Some are fearful. Some just hold it in. Some let it out,
Yeah.
And it was really beautiful taking them there. And sometimes disappointing because we had to walk back down the hill and just leading those groups. I loved doing that. And then we filmed each one and then would hang out and debrief at the bottom. And the Norwegians loved us. And yeah.
Is it wrong of me to somewhat want to have been brought up in that generation, like learning how to base jump in the 90s? I don't I love the generation I was in. I was mid 2000s. And I think if I were to, wager between all of the different eras, that one is the second best. But it seems as though the 90s was the best.
Yeah. The 90s, it was opening up. Because I made my first base jump in 1982. And it was all undercover. And it was all at night, which made it even trickier, It
also seems like the community was a bit tighter back then.
It was really tight back then.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So can you tell me about the community back then? What made it so tight? What was the atmosphere like back then?
Well, shall I tell you about my first base jump?
Of course.
My first base jump, I was new to America. I came to America in 1982. I was about a 500 jump skydiver. And this was before I'd built my canopies. This was just with skydiving gear. And I was going up north with a friend just for a tour. And the friend said to me, I have a friend in Auburn that would base jump off the bridge if you want to watch him. And I went, oh my gosh, that would be awesome to watch. Some base jumping was that's what was done in El Cap, and then they got grounded, I was like,
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, it'd be cool. So we went up there, and his name was BK Hansen. And BK said, yeah, I'll jump off the bridge, but I don't have any equipment for some reason. And I went, I've got my skydiving gear in the back of the car. You can use that. And he goes, okay. So we went to his place, and I didn't know what he was doing at the time, but I believe he just took the slider off or pulled the slider down on my, what was the canopy? It was an old 7-cell. It had a huge reputation of sniveling on opening. But when he took the slider down, it's definitely solved that problem. And he jumped off the bridge with my gear, and I didn't actually see him jump off the bridge. I saw my gear jump off the bridge. And I went, oh my gosh, that works.
Yes.
Yeah. And he comes back up and he goes, you want to do it? And I went, hell yeah.
Of course.
So we went back to his place, packed it back up again. And then we got to the bridge, and it was up at the road. There was hardly anybody going down the road these days. It was not as populated as it is now. But he said, see that tree up there? Just look at that tree, reach up and jump. And I'm going, okay. So I did it. And I tell you, to this day, I still see that tree. It's a little bit bigger now. And I did it. And I had my pilot chute in my hand. It was hand deploy.
Yeah.
So I had it in my hand. And I jumped, and it was a couple of seconds, and you throw the pilot chute, and then it opened. And it was great. I had an off-heading opening and landed on the other side and all this, but it didn't really matter, right? I was buzzing. I was buzzing. I got down, I went back up. I came back up the top of the hill, and I said to the guy I was with, hey, your turn. Do you want to go? And he didn't want to go. And basically, he didn't talk to me all the way home.
Oh, no.
I was buzzing. And he was what's the feeling when, she did it and I didn't have the guts to do it? Or
threatened, emasculated?
Yeah, something like that. Yeah, and I didn't see him much after that. I think he disappeared.
No. Well, I mean,
and I was just buzzing. Yeah.
Is.
And then I'm out at Paris on the grass, and I'm watching these guys pack their parachutes. And they were doing it with their slider down. And I went, hey, I know what you're doing. Where are you going? And they go, we're not telling you. It's a big secret. We're not telling you. And so I kept bugging them. I go, where are you going? And they said, we're going base jumping, but it's up in Lodi, up at the antennas.
Power towers?
Up at the antennas
yep.
in Lodi. And he said, but you can't come because there's no room in the car. There's 4 of us. We have 4-seater cars, so you can't come. And I went, I've got a car.
I'll be there.
And I showed up because they were meeting at Lodi. And I showed up and they went, shit, she's here. They go, throw her in the back of the car and blindfold her.
Oh my God.
Don't let her know where they are, So they were joking. I mean, They were my friends or people I had been skydiving with anyway. So we all went to this antenna and they said to me, can you climb a 2,000-foot ladder? I go, I don't know.
Yeah.
I have no clue if I can climb a 2,000-foot ladder. And they said, okay, well, we got a 2,000-foot ladder.
Yeah, you're about to find out.
We're about to find out. Well, there was 4 of them and 1 of me. So 2 of them started first. I went in the middle and the 2 of them behind me. So I was kind of the buffer, and I'm damned if I was going to be slow.
Yeah.
I was going to keep up with those guys. I didn't want to let them down, right? And I'm climbing and I watched these 2 in front of me. And then they would take a pause and stop. And I'm going, great. So I can kind of catch up. And then I would take a pause and they would leave. And then the 2 behind me would catch up with me. And I'm going, oh no. And I would keep up. So I was in between this group. And we get to the top and it was a 2,000-foot ladder. We get to the top and it was beautiful. It was the towers up there. In Lodi, Walnut Grove, it was called. I'm letting out all the old secrets. We're not meant to tell anybody.
Well, I mean, there's another secret in there which eludes most of the people that are jumping today, which is if you're going to have to if you want to keep an object or an exit point secret, you literally have to blindfold and put people in the trunk. Yeah. Otherwise, you're going to lose that object. You post it on Instagram, it's going to get found.
Yeah. We didn't have Instagram back then. It was just us. Anyway, after that, apparently I passed the test.
You earned your stripes.
Yes. And after that, I went with them and they'd invite me. We'd go and do the antenna, or we were going back to the bridge that I knew that we could jump. And then I was doing it with just one of them. It's like once a month we would go up there and I was accepted. I was in the group. So.
What do you make of earning one's stripes? It doesn't seem like that is commonplace or even something that is being attempted today. No one is really making anyone earn stripes. You can just show up and do it.
Well, actually, back in the day, it was show up and do it because there was nobody being able to teach anything. I mean, BK taught me to look at that tree and arch and go and hold the parachute for 2 seconds. That was it. And that was a launch point. So down the line, we were realizing, Todd and I, even when we went to Lake Powell or Moab, nobody was teaching anything. And then we went, okay, we need classes. We need to teach people skydiving. And people are going, I don't need to be taught. We don't need to do classes. But then we would push for classes and push for classes. And now you do take classes. People do first jump course for base jumping, and it is a thing. I mean, you can see the odd person that, squeezes through and doesn't. I mean, one time I was up in Twin Falls and I'm walking there and these two people come up. They were meant to be jumping with somebody else who didn't show up. And I went, oh, okay, well, that's a shame. And they said to me, will you, no, I had two friends that I was PCAing off at the Prine.
Yeah.
So I PCA'd them and then they came up to me and said, would you PCA me? Because, my friend didn't show up. And I'm going, sure. So I PCA'd the two of them. And then, we were a little group and then I jumped. And then we get down. I went, how many base jumps are you guys done? And they go, oh, that was our first one.
None.
No, a friend was meant to come up and teach us.
Right.
Went,
Tricked you.
Okay.
I've been in that shoe too. I've been in that shoe where somebody's like, oh yeah, can I just come out to the bridge with you guys? I'm like, oh, of course. Yeah. walk with us. And then
they
we go
had
through
the gear.
Yeah. They got the gear. They got the thing.
Yeah.
Then we go through the whole jump and, they do their own thing and then we land and I'm like, yeah, that was a great jump. They're like, yeah, it was, wasn't it? And I'm like, you really enjoyed that. And they're like, yep, first one. I was like,
yeah. Yeah.
Like it's definitely, since that experience, taught me to ask many, many more questions when I don't know somebody that's just shown up to the exit point.
Yeah. Yeah. Or even just test them. Go, hey, what do you think of the winds?
Exactly.
Yeah.
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 Huh.
What's your delay? What are you going to do?
So let me ask you this to kind of fast forward through your progression. You started with that one jump, and since then, how many different countries have you jumped in?
Oh, okay. So New Zealand, a base jump.
Yeah.
Yeah. New Zealand, Australia. So let's go up. Malaysia, Singapore, Thailand, China, America, obviously.
Yeah.
And then France and Spain, Austria, Germany, Italy, Norway, and what's further east? Skydiving. I said China, eh?
Yeah, Mexico.
Yeah. I haven't. I never did. I never did the cave.
And you've been in SoCal your whole life. I always thought that you did Mexico, at least one of the buildings.
Oh, yeah. Hang on. No, we went to a building in Mexico, but we got winded out.
Ah, okay.
Yeah.
So it's been quite a journey since that first jump.
Yeah. It was a magnetic pull.
Yeah.
It wasn't a plan. It was like, I'm going this way. And the unfortunate thing about it is you lose your friends along the way. And back then and now. But you'd lose your friends along the way. And the other thing about it is you make huge friends along the way. Awesome friends, not huge, awesome friends along the way. And you're a real tight-knit group. And you just trust each other and know each other and love each other. And it's just amazing. Yeah, that is part of the pull.
The Sky family.
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of strength in your generation on that front too. Like maybe not just strength, but also organization. Of all of the community family events that I've attended over my base jumping career, if you want to call it that, I think most of them have been organized by your generation, the ones that truly get the community together.
Yeah. Yeah. Marta and Jimmy did a lot of that.
They did a lot of that, didn't they?
Mm.
Let me
They
ask
were that
you
sort
this.
of people.
Yeah, as far as losing friends along the way, have you seen the movie Fly?
I was unable to, so I haven't seen it yet.
Mm-hmm.
But Scott said he would show it to me on his big screen TV, and we haven't done that yet.
Yeah, I haven't seen it
I was
either.
working when it came out, and everybody went to watch it.
Yeah, same as me. And I also heard that there was a couple of things that I might not want to watch in an audience, which among them is Jimmy's video, his last video.
Yeah.
As he was, going in Moab.
Yeah. Yeah. Those things are rather rough.
Yeah.
It's a funny sport. You can be so excited and elated, and then the next thing is devastation.
It seems to almost be in balance. Like the longer I've stayed in it, the more the balance is almost obvious. Like for all of the positives, there are also negatives, and they're both in extremes. Like you've got a pile of positives and a pile of negatives, but like on balance, it's like we've nearly broken even.
Yeah. We used to think that we could work on why people were dying. Like we built good equipment and then we trained courses. But now it's all different. It's gone to a wingsuiting sport pretty much too, base jumping.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's added in a whole new side of necessary innovation. And so it very much seems like we're reliving the patterns of your generation as far as like innovation goes and mistakes.
Yeah.
Like, we're basically attacking the sport anew again.
Yeah.
And having to learn hard lessons that y'all learned on the parachute side, but now on the wingsuit side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And are there people teaching that?
As best they can.
Yeah.
I mean, I keep telling people to put, education in perspective and, realize that your generation was the first one to do curriculum-based instruction at all. Like anything that was regimented or organized or anything of the kind.
Oh, yeah, because base jumping was a free spirit sport.
Right.
You do whatever you want.
Do whatever you want.
You don't need to go to no stinking class.
But obviously there are some great things to know.
Yeah.
So you guys started informing the public, the community about them. And that was my generation. Like I was taught by you. And so now we're on my generation teaching, and I have to constantly remind people to put that in perspective. This is the second generation that we've ever tried to teach a human being anything related to base jumping.
Yeah.
Which puts us like at a very infant level when it comes to like our educational maturity, so to speak.
Yeah.
So like when you ask me, like, are people teaching that? And I say, as best they can, like literally as best we can in the second generation of this thing.
Yeah. With new innovations and new disciplines in the sport. Like we were never teaching wingsuiting.
Yeah.
We were teaching you how to save your life with mainly jumping off a cliff,
Yeah. And I think
3,000 foot cliff, a 172 foot cliff, 173, whatever, a bridge, basically how to save your life. But the wingsuiting just went further and beyond, and it's beautiful. I mean, look at all the things they're doing.
Yeah.
Flying through the cliffs and around the cliffs. I mean, when I first started base jumping with a wingsuit, the whole idea was to get away from the cliff.
Yeah, no doubt.
I was like, oh, look at us. We can go way out away from the cliff, And then it was like, hey, if you turn left, you can go through the waterfall and then go away from the cliff. That was our wingsuiting.
So other than it being beautiful and also more intense, what do you make of modern base jumping? Are you base jumping these days, and how much?
I have 3 favorites that I do. One is base jumping, one is skydiving, and one is flying.
Uh-huh.
And I used to look back and say, okay, what was my favorite last year? So which one took priority?
Yeah.
And they would pretty much be equal. But now they're not. Now flying has probably got my highest passion. And base jumping has fallen to the 3rd purely because we live in Southern California and there's nowhere to jump.
Yeah.
I mean, we have Rubidoux, and I go out and do that. But I don't need to make a big trip to Europe in the summer anymore. I did that for several years, 10 or so years, every summer going over to Europe, and loved it. And now people are still doing it. And I look at them and I'm thinking, okay, I've been there and I've done that. I don't need to do that anymore. So I'm trying to learn how to fly my pits upside down and inside out.
Okay. So is it safe to say that you're, kind of 1 foot out the door when it comes to base jumping then? Or are you still 2 feet in, but not as much as you used to be?
2 feet in, but it's not a priority.
Yeah. Okay.
So Taylor Cole started organizing these boogies at Rubidoux.
Yeah.
And they are so much fun. So much fun. And I go there as safety officer. I'm always the safety officer. So they can have, I mean, honestly, Rubidoux is a sled ride.
Yeah.
You know? And of
Whee!
course, he makes it into a sled ride. He's got a bouncy house that you can do accuracy in, and he's got the slip and slide with the
blow-up
pins.
pins. Yeah.
Yeah. And then
And the kiddie pool and the Velcro wall.
Yeah. And it's just a ball, and people have so much fun, but it's still a high risk sport.
Yeah.
So I stand on top of the cliff and PCA everybody. PCAing everybody is quicker and cleaner than tying in with a brake tie every time.
Yeah.
And I love looking. I mean, they'll come to me as a person and I see them as a set of equipment. I do. I look at it and I go, your leg straps, your chest strap, you go, and they're going, they'll be dressed up, and down the line they'll go, hey, you static line me, you PCA'd me off Rubidoux. And I'm going, did I? You know?
I don't remember
I don't know
your
what
face.
you look like. No, I mean,
what did your pins look like?
Exactly. Show me your rig. And I really enjoy standing there and watching them go and watching them have such a good time. And they've given me so many compliments where they'll come up and say, I trust you with my pilot chute. I know that when you've got it, that you're going to PCA correctly. And I ask them, I go, before I say, do you want it on pin opening, or do you want it on container close, or you want the pilot chute to open your pin? I don't do that at Rubidoux. I mean, I'm doing it pin opening. But if we're somewhere else, I go, how long do you want me to PCA you for, you know?
Yeah.
So I can judge it all now, and I've done thousands of PCAs, and I just love watching their energy. And then, of course, at the end of it, I jump down, because I'll tie in and just do a static line and jump down. But I see them walk up as a set of equipment, not as a person, but don't tell them that.
Well, it sounds like you're still very much enjoying modern base jumping and the culture and being part of the...
Yeah. I hate Rubidoux just to be the only thing I can talk about these years, but I really don't need to venture downtown LA in the dark anymore.
And be crawling around anymore?
Uh-huh.
And be crawling around
and
anymore?
be crawling around and running from the cops. I don't need to do that anymore. I did need to do it back in the 80s. I definitely needed to do it for some reason. But the going to Europe, I'm just happy that I've been there and done that, and just love it when other people do. But I don't need to do that anymore.
Yeah.
But if someone said, hey, you want to do a base jumping trip to Europe with me, that'll be hard to turn down.
It would, right?
Yeah. If Todd comes up and goes, hey, how about we go to Europe? I'll go, oh, yes.
Yeah, I'm feeling the same way these days. I'm not on the prowl for base jumping, but I am definitely open to opportunities.
Yeah. Yeah, I got my rig packed.
Yeah, yep.
Slide it down, actually. Actually not, because I used it for a demo. It's really, really good for demo jumps. When you're doing skydiving demos and it's a tight landing area, like in the middle of the cross streets in town.
Yeah.
I got my base gear. It doesn't let me down. Yeah.
If you don't mind, can I go way, way back to a small thing that you said that's been on my mind ever since you said it, relating to gender? There was a statement that you made earlier, and this is a total jump shift from our earlier topics, that was when you were learning how to rig, your mentor said, and she's a girl.
Yeah, he wasn't my mentor. He was my examiner.
Examiner, right? Okay.
He was
so
my
she was
examiner.
he was passing you, and he said, and she's a girl, like excitedly.
Yeah. Yeah, he said that to others in the bar.
Yeah. And I'm wondering how you took that.
Oh, flattery, really. Because we were only the women were like 10%. 10% of skydiving, maybe 20% of skydiving were women. 10% of base jumping down the line. Flattery, but I also felt that because I was a girl, I was kind of making the way the guys would use, especially in rigging, put it this way, the guys would use strength.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have strength. So I said to them, I go, well, you guys use strength. I use technique.
Yeah.
So I had to find a way around them just using muscle. So I had to find a tool or a technique that would get by, and or end up with the same result. And it was. I mean, I could easily do that. They would just be brute force and ignorance, you know?
Yeah.
So there was a technique that you could learn, and I found it. So that was the thing. It was just finding different techniques. But the upper hand that I had was back in the day when I was at school, we as girls, especially in New Zealand, we were taught to sew and cook. We never learned metalwork or woodwork or any of that sort of stuff. But I knew how to sew and cook. And I took sewing to rigging. And it was like easy. I just pick up a machine and go, sewing machine and go. It wasn't a problem. Where the guys would be challenged with learning how to sew.
Very much so, yeah.
Yeah.
I had to, it was a headache just learning how to thread the machine. It was intimidating, you know? I was like, oh my God, there are so many little working pieces and bits and bobs here.
Yeah. So I already had a huge advantage with that. So I didn't feel like I was an under person at all. Just totally equal.
It's interesting that you bring those differences up, because I find very much so that because we are a majority male enterprise, sport, practice, whatever you want to call it, that we do miss a lot of things because we don't have the necessity for some innovation. Like when you're talking about those techniques, clearly that makes it better for everybody. You know, like somebody can use less strength to do that thing, even if they don't need to. But like, I think in general, we benefit more from having a diverse population. And it seems that like in modern times, that's almost met with friction, you know, because it's been such a one-way street for so long.
Yeah. And we are two totally different types of people.
Yeah, right.
And we approach things totally different ways.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I was just talking to another female base jumper about intuition on the exit point. And she was basically saying to me like, hey, my intuition was saying the same things as a lot of the men on the exit point, but I was the only one taking them seriously. And I go, yeah, it's a common thing. You know, like by and large, I do not see a lot of male counterpoints taking their emotions seriously. Rather, they're like at kind of war with them.
Yeah. And having to fight through it, and this is not how I feel.
Right.
Yeah.
And then like, so I had her recount the objectives of the actual scenario, and it turns out like, yeah, they were all like, you know, kind of in a dangerous position, thinking about doing a wingsuit jump in a quartering tailwind, which is not great, like not ideal, even if the wall is huge.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, yeah, your intuition was correct. And it's unfortunate that the intuition in general, like the 90% intuition, I think has trouble acting on it. Yeah.
I totally agree until it also gets physical. The physical side will kick in, meaning or overwhelm the thought process. Because I met a guy who was sitting on launch point in Norway, and he had been considering it and trying to dampen it down and go, no, I can do this, until he sat there long enough that he got hypothermia.
Oh, man.
Yeah. And then he started shaking, and then his mental capacity just totally deteriorated.
Yeah.
And his physical was deteriorating, and we're going, all right, now you need help. You know, now we're going to take you away from the edge. Yeah, you're not jumping. We got to heat you up. We got to get you off this cliff, you know?
Right. Yeah. The decision point for this being reasonable passed
is long gone.
Long time ago. Yeah. Should have been right when you felt bad about it, but like you pushed it, and then so here we are.
He was lucky we were there to help him out, you know? So
yeah. And that's, I think, less and less common these days, which is also why I say, like, I very much envy coming up in your generation. You know, these days, I think a lot of people look at it as personal choice for everyone, no matter what they're observing in that person. Even if they're observing that person is completely unfit to make the jump, still they like have their hands in the air going like, their choice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. It's a scary time.
Wow. Yeah.
I kind of want to ask you another thing about the common culture these days, and it's still connected to the "and she's a girl" statement. I think the more common things that I've observed people saying and hearing when it comes to being a girl is, "Ooh, she's a girl," and "but she's a girl," and not so much "and she's a girl." What do you make of that?
Well, I guess I don't hear the oohs and the buts. They don't make it to the girl.
Huh.
They're kept, so you just don't know what they're thinking, really. Might come out a little bit in conversation. But I think if you just are an equal and hold your own and don't be a girl. Like if I was climbing the antenna with those 4 guys and they had to wait for me for a couple of hours, when they got to the top, they would be going, "Well, what do you expect? She's a girl,"
Yeah.
But since I was equal to them, it didn't matter what gender I was. I'd proved a point, and it was not an issue. I could stand up to do what they were doing. And I understand, physique-wise, guys are a lot stronger than girls. So there's a point where we can't do it, and it's like, "Hey, can you help me out here?" That sort of stuff. But I've never really been put down for being a girl, I don't believe, that I know of, that anybody said.
Yeah, that's
because I think
an
I can
interesting
stand
point.
up to the rest of them.
Yeah, sorry, that was an interesting realization that I just made as you were discussing that, in that, like, I am telling you things that are not said in front of the women. They're just said in the background.
Yeah.
And that's where I've picked them up.
Yeah. Yeah. So I try and feel that background out a little bit. It's like, so what do they think of me? Or, if you're new in an environment and you're doing this, like that with flying. Because most of the flying I'm doing is general aviation, and we like to do aerobatics and learn a lot with that. And it's a male industry, male sport that I'm in. Basically what I'm saying is where I am at my airport where I keep the planes.
Yeah.
And I look around and it's like, shit, I'm the only girl doing this. But initially I don't even consider that. I mean, I asked them because unfortunately I never learned metal work and woodwork and engineering when I was at school. So if I have an issue with the plane, I ask for help, and the good thing about it is that they're all there to help. They'll go, "Oh, we'll help her." So maybe they're thinking, "Oh, we'll help her because she's a girl." I don't know.
Yeah.
They're thinking, I don't know what they're thinking, but I totally see that I'm an equal. We can go out and fly together or not, or train or... But
it's interesting to hear you say, "I don't even consider it," in the beginning. Like, I wonder why it doesn't make you tired to constantly prove yourself. And if I can ask, is it because you just planned from the beginning to be better than most anyway? Like, you're like, I'm already going to be better than most of these people at this thing. Like, I'm trying to be the best I possibly can be. And so proving myself is almost a, foregone conclusion.
No, but I'm not better.
Or, I mean, at least equal to, like, you're planning on being better.
Yeah.
Like, you're planning on, like,
Yeah,
I've
we're
never
all
seen
in
you
this
approach
together.
any of this thing, anything with, half a heart, or thinking that you're going to do the bare minimum. Like, I've seen you excel at so many different industries.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I just go in thinking this is what I want to do, and I surround myself with people that are also doing it. And then I look and I go, "Oh, I'm the only girl doing this." In flying, in base jumping and skydiving, not now.
So back to base jumping. Looking back over your career, how does it look? Are you happy with all of the moments that you've brought to your life in base jumping? Are there some regrets that you have from over the years? Or is there anything that kind of encapsulates that experience for you?
If I was ever to do it, if I was ever offered, if I wanted to do it again, I would totally do it again.
The whole ride, from start to finish.
And base jumping?
Yeah.
Absolutely. The things I wouldn't do again would lose so many friends, but I think it's going to happen anyway. But the whole ride, absolutely. I loved getting in the early days. I loved doing the innovation. I loved being the first base parachute in the world, you know. I loved teaching the first jump course and taking them on excursions around the world. Well, around the world. We did Norway and Switzerland. It's the only place we taught. Oh, and here, up in Twin Falls and stuff like that. I loved doing all that. I thoroughly loved having the basic research partnership with Todd.
Yeah.
I think together he's like my brother, and we worked really well together, and that was fabulous. And then moving on now and leaving it all behind, I'm happy with that too, because I'm going off and doing different things. Yeah. The one thing I would have been really scared of was getting married and having kids.
I mean, that's a journey. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's scary. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, as you're kind of fading into other priorities, I'm curious to ask you, is there anything that you want to leave behind to the next generation? There are very few people nowadays that get to interact with you on the level that I got to. So for all of those folks who might not meet you in the future, is there anything that you'd like to leave behind for them as they start to pursue their journey in base?
Well, I'm sure there's a lot of things I'd like to leave behind, but the biggest one is just do it with caution, or do it. People say, how come you're still alive? You know, you did all this from the beginning. And I just had a full-on passion for safety. You can do high-risk stuff, but if you have a passion for safety, you do it with caution. You double-check everything. You learn everything you can. You use the right equipment. You sit there and study it, not be in a hurry. Then the passion is even greater, I believe. The safer you can make it, the safer for your friends, the safer you can make a high-risk sport, the more enjoyment you get out of it.
100%.
Yeah.
I completely agree. And I guess that's a great place to end. Annie, thank you so much for joining us. It was an absolute pleasure.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We hope you enjoyed this episode. If you have any thoughts about what you've just heard, please don't hesitate to reach out to us. Big shout out to Mark Stockwell, our sound engineer and co-producer. We love you, and we couldn't do this without you. If you'd like to learn more about the podcast, visit our website, exitpointpodcast.com. And if you're jumping out there, remember, we've all been uplifted by the generations that came before us. They put their lives on the line, and what we owe them is learning from their work to show our respect for the sacrifices they've made.
One little story.
Yeah, so I wanted to get that one little story back so that I could put this at the end. This is after we stopped recording and all of a sudden you launched into this great little interlude. So tell me, what happened on the drop zone?
We were in the packing area, and I'm just packing my skydiving rig, and there's other younger people packing their gear together, having a little chit-chat about base jumping. And they were talking about equipment or something like that about base jumping that I was quite familiar with. And I turned around and made a comment about what they were discussing. And they looked at me and said, "Oh, Annie, you've made a base jump?" And I said, "Yeah."
One or two?
No, that was it.
Yeah. Wow.
I just went, yeah.
And then you just walked on.
Packed on. Yeah, that was it.
It's really interesting that your generation is almost somewhat becoming invisible when, you really invented the game. That's a hilarious story for somebody to just like see a legend walk by, literally, responsible for the technology that they're discussing. Just like flies right over their head.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And the funny thing is that the people, like I may fade away, but the equipment is still being jumped that we innovated. That continues, whether they know to put two and two together or not, you know?
Well, on that note, you will always be a legend in my book, and you will always be a legend in any book that has legends of base jumping, for sure. And I'm so glad that your energy continues to live on in the parachute equipment and the stuff that you've taught us and the lessons that we've learned from you. I thank you and I love you.
Thank you. I love you too.